IDW Sonic Comic Issue 31. The story thankfully starts out in Blaze's castle. We see Sonic at the dinner table with Blaze, instead of sleeping for some reason. I hope he's eating here after he took a long nap and is just doing this in between naps. Blaze says that the Sonic she knew was an independent hero and there's no threat too dire that he wouldn't face it with a smile. I guess this is leading up to her saying he has amnesia. But why would having amnesia get rid of his confidence entirely? I guess because his confidence solely relies on remembering that he's a hero and has so many accomplishments. And without that, he's just insecure, which can make sense to me. He says that Sonic sounds impressive and he'd like to meet him one day as he's drinking tea. So he's got amnesia. To be fair, he probably hit his head when he slammed on the ground. Just like what we're supposed to believe is what happened to Shadow after Rescue 2 and his sacrifice. But that's not how people actually get amnesia. Hitting your head is more likely to make you have anterograde amnesia. Infection is actually more likely to cause you amnesia. It's already ridiculous enough that easy amnesia was used once. Too bad Sonic's smiling with his eyes half closed like he's smug anyways. He could have been more likable than this, instead of making me think of a villain shapeshifted into Sonic who's just smug because he's easily fooling Blaze. He says that he met a precocious little girl who called him Mr. Needlemouse, so he likes that name. Blaze fortunately explains that Sonic has some time to rest and think. Okay, good. So I'm supposed to assume that it's justified that he doesn't have horrible sleep deprivation at this point. I would have liked to see at least one panel of him sleeping in a bed. I was looking forward to that. Sonic X let me see that in the Metrix arc. It was sweet of Vanilla to tuck him into bed like that. And that was after he passed out from exhaustion. I got to see him vulnerable and sympathetic for a change, and that's what was being built up to. Blaze asks him if he remembers anything, and he says that all of his memories seem warped. Why is he still smiling though? Maybe he forgot everything because he secretly wanted to? That's what I always expected about Shadow, because he remembered Maria dying, and he's an artificial ultimate life form. So his brain could work a bit differently. It's a bit more confusing for Sonic to be like that though. He says that he dreams of the sea and sky, and a golden fire and a sense of falling. I guess we're supposed to believe it makes sense that he's smiling. Not just because he suspects for good reason that he's better off not remembering the traumatic mental virus arc that he's accidentally responsible for. So no wonder he wanted to forget that. But he's also smiling because he's supposed to be carefree. I'm just trying to make sense of this. How does he have amnesia? It's a nice contrast from Shadow that Sonic's happy with amnesia. Then after we see rubble in front of Amy's desk, which is full of paperwork, Amy says that she can't do this. She complains that she's no leader, and helped administrate the resistance because everyone needed to pitch in, and only took over the restoration because there was no one else and work had to be done. She wishes she could go back to the days when it was just her and Sonic racing from one adventure to the next. Sally's had moments where she broke down from the pressure and stress too. Well, I'm not sure if Lynn will have the guts to outright give her a breakdown. I mean, things have been dark enough as it is. I guess this is the closest she can come to it. And I'm glad this plot thread actually got wrapped up. Of course this is happening. She thinks about Sonic and says that she shouldn't give up because Sonic didn't. She wishes she had some help. Sure is fiction-y convenient that Jules shows up right now. At least have a text box saying an hour later. Why do we have to see so many boring panels of them talking? I immediately got that Jewel was going to work for her the minute I saw her. Cut to the chase. She at least explains why she's here. She was told Amy wanted help and she loves organizing. So she wants to take over administration to give her a break. Amy thanks her and says their primary goals are organizing supplies and rebuilding and finding people displaced by the Robians. It sure would suck for Amy if this was a shapeshifter pretending to be Jewel instead so that she could evilly take over the restoration, because this is too good to be true. And we cut to some people trapped in a dark hole in Echo Mine. For fuck's sake, why would the writer show us Rough and Tumble having any hope of getting out? A writer with any common sense and knowledge at all would have never shown them again. It was barely worth turning them into Robians if it wasn't actually going to get rid of them forever. I was proud of the comic. At least one of them gets the karma of being scared of a cave spider. But I can't relate to Tangle and telling them to grab her tail so they can be pulled out. They laugh at them for saving them and plan on running wild. Why have this scene? Tangle thinks he'll be back in jail by the end of the day anyways. At least she says this to comfort me. Tails says he's fine because Sonic's beaten the odds before and never let him down. It's confusing that Tangle calls Tails aces. That's what Marine said earlier. She says that Sonic would want them to celebrate and says there's going to be a party at her place and everyone's invited, which takes advantage of her optimistic personality some more. Then we see Silver going back to the future. Because we're seeing it, I'm guessing he'll be disappointed again. Otherwise, there'd be no point in having that scene. He sees some grass and a bunch of city buildings and some square holograms everywhere, drawn haphazardly with no text on it because the artist didn't know how else to make it look futuristic. So he's thankful that Sonic saved the day. So Omega ends up being fixed, apparently while being moved with anti-gravity. I was wondering what he looked like after being given a new design from Tails trying to repair him, but apparently the artist didn't even have the guts for that. They were allowed to change the characters' designs to make them Zombots, so they were allowed to change Omega's design all they wanted. Omega wants revenge on Eggman, and I'm baffled that Eggman didn't remove the rebelliousness from him, which was instantly common sense. He did that for Metal Sonic, so how is he being this stupid? Eggman says he locked down his body so there will be no mayhem for him. That's kinda smart, but not nearly as smart as removing his free will. He at least says he'll use him for a special project. And we see Orbot reading a picture book or a magazine while Cubot's playing with some tacks on the floor, which tries to take advantage of their characters properly for once for some human moments. Orbot tells Eggman that the Robians damaged his bases. Who cares? He'll repair them anyways. Orbot says Zavok's been safely locked away. Too bad the heroes didn't have the brains to give him the death penalty. I asked that about King Acorn not doing that with Drago too. Eggman doesn't want to rest, even if his robots wish he would. And Orbot satisfyingly says that Eggman has been working very hard to doom them all. Eggman wants to establish his new plan before Sonic inevitably returns, being smart enough to anticipate his return, thankfully. It's hard to believe this next arc is by the same writer. It's nice of Cubot to say that he liked Starline because he smelled nice. We see Starline in his own building. He says that he's still loyal to Eggman despite his cruelty, and says he'll conquer the world and surpass him so that he'll learn by example. Then he's not that loyal to him if he's going to be his rival. But at least it tries to preserve his intended fanboy character, which was the only interesting thing about him. He wants Eggman to listen to him and acknowledge he was right and work together with him so they can be equals. Then we see Vector getting calls in Seaside City, and he wants to order a pizza, which humanizes them. He says that all those missing person cases make him miss the days when the Chaotix couldn't find work. But at least they're being consistently useful. It's nice of Cream to show up to bring the Chaotix tasty treats as a reward for working hard. I guess that makes it worth the fact that the scene is complete padding so far. The pacing's just as slow as ever. SBO nicely calls Cream a treasure, though it's stilted that he calls her Miss Cream. So what are the snacks? Did the writer care enough to establish that? Vanilla nicely calls the Chaotix selfless for their actions earlier, and Vector blushes. So the writers actually bothered to do research on Sonic X and found out they're supposed to have a crush on Vanilla. I was surprised because it's been forever since I was referenced. If this is just a one-time gag, it'll be a waste of time. Too bad Flynn doesn't want to bother letting game characters date each other, because God forbid they be happier than usual. That'd be the end of the world. He complains that he has no time to do anything, and suddenly it turns out that General is fully repaired from last time, real conveniently. So he scans data immediately because he was asked to help by Vanilla, and prepares a database of all the missing people. Cream tells her Chow to put the files away, and Vanilla says that Cream and her will handle the calls for now, and update Vector as General processes information. Cream says she'll take lots of notes. Good, so all these characters are going to be more useful than they ever were before instead of doing nothing like usual. It's new of them to want to help the Chaotix. It's a miracle that they thought to do that. Rouge telling Shadow that he can be a pain to track down only makes it bothersome that the writer was too lazy to explain how she tracked him down. He wouldn't be a pain to track down if Gunn had the good sense to have a tracking device in him. Or he could have a cell phone that she geolocated. But I guess her point is that even if she did that to find him, he can run so fast that he won't stay anywhere for long. So she had to keep on chasing him down until she finally caught up. But she should have said that, because in a world with sentient robots, anybody would be easy to track down. If Gunn can call Shadow to give him new missions in 06, Rouge would be able to track him down no problem. Like, ask where he is that way. Shadow's quiet, and Rouge asks what's up because of it. He finds it unacceptable that he hadn't listened to the warning to run and got roboticized instead. So do I. He says he owes Sonic, and now he's gone. Rouge smiles, thankful that she got the truth out of him. What a miracle. For once they have an actual friendship moment that shows they're actual friends. She tries to invite him to Tangle's party, and she at least explains that she figured he'd say no and just wanted to try. It turns out even Jet showed up to the party, and apparently he was too embarrassed to admit that he had gotten infected himself because he's lying here that he nearly got infected. At least I hope we're supposed to think that, and it's not just the writer forgetting continuity. He asks where his recognition is because he tried to save people earlier and doesn't have a nice sculpture of his own. It should be obvious that it's because he's still a thief, but I guess we're supposed to think he's insecure enough to need that kind of validation. Storm says they ought to save the world more often because they're getting dinner and a show. Good thing he's learning his lesson there. Tangle puts her arm around Whisper, who's upset that people who had attacked the town earlier are at the party. I read the issue she was talking about, and they didn't attack the town, so that was dumb. Tangle's somehow dumb enough to ask if her wisps eat. Maybe she is stupid. Then the story ends with Eggman's voice coming out of his mecha and threatening the heroes in front of some rubble. This issue is by Ian Flynn, and it wasn't horrible. After we find out that Sonic of course has amnesia ridiculously easily and is with Blaze, a bunch of little moments happen in scenes, like Jewel replacing Amy as the leader because Amy can't stand the work anymore, realistically, and Cream, Vanilla, and General helping to pick up the workload when the Chaotix are swamped with missing person cases. Eggman's somehow dumb enough to not remove Omega's free will right away and just lock down his fixed body first, and eventually he attacks Tangle's party with his mecha. I guess he spied on them to find out he had to go here. Looked on the internet or something? That should have been explained. While Sonic's amnesia is incredibly arbitrary, I can't help but see it as a good thing because of the sheer fact that it makes Sonic carefree, because he's not worrying about the fact that he's separated from his friends. He deserves a vacation for a few days.